Hello, my name is Angela Zajac Brook from Angela Brook Art, in case you don't know me, and I do Facebook Live on art journaling, and I'm making some videos for YouTube so they're more organized and cuts out all the other stuff that we're talking about. And tonight I'm going to talk about gesso. I get asked about gesso a lot. So what gesso does is it creates a surface for you to be able to paint on. And so when I use my little Jane Davenport journal, I use the Jane Davenport. It comes in a small container, the gesso. If I'm going to paint on the page, or if I'm going to do layers. And like this page here started out with gesso. Now if I'm just going to draw on the page, then gesso is not necessary. And that one there also started with gesso. And it makes it a nice surface that it accepts paint better. If you're going to use spray inks, you don't necessarily have to use the gesso. So that's what I do for the Jane Davenport, one that I carry in my purse. The other journal, my go-to journal that I talk about a lot, the Canson Mixed to Media, I always journal on most of the pages if I'm going to put layers on there. If I'm going to draw, then I don't put gesso on that page. And when I pick the page that I'm going to gesso, I gesso both sides of it. And gesso comes in different colors. And this is the black gesso, which it works the same as white, but what you have to realize is it's not going to be shiny like paint. So this will still need a paint over it. So it gives you a dark background, and you could, if you paint over with black paint, it will look nicer than trying to paint over white gesso. So black gesso is one option. The gesso that I like to use is the Liquitex Professional that comes in this container, and the reason I like this is it's thin. Liquitex also makes a basic gesso that's a thicker. This in this container has a nice top. So I find when I use ones that have the lid like that, the dried stuff ends up inside. So I love that this one is that you're just able to pour it out. And another question I get is, what is clear gesso for? This is Liquitex clear gesso. And you can use this if you want to put a paper in. Let's say I have a tag, and I want to put this tag in my journal, and I want this to not get covered up with paint. Then I could put clear gesso on top of it, and then when I paint over it, this will allow me to wipe off the paint easier. The other place I use the clear gesso is in the Dina Wakley journal. On the page that has the canvas, I put the clear gesso on, and allows me to paint on that page, and it shrinks a little bit, but it just works better than the white gesso. So those are the two. So there's black gesso, the clear gesso, this is the white gesso, and along with the white gesso, I wanted to show you what I do is I usually, I'm going to turn my camera down. I usually gesso ahead several pages. So I let them dry. I don't use a blow dryer on them or anything like that. And I do them, I'll put wax paper, plain old house pulled wax paper in between, as you can see. So I gesso this page and then I let it dry. This is gessoed. So I want to show you another fun thing to do is you can color your own gesso. And I have the Liquitex gesso in there, and I have some paint, some heavy body paint. And I just kind of show you, the more paint you put, the darker it'll come out. It will tone it down. It's not going to look like the original color. So you just mix it together and then paint it on your page. So it just softened the color. It started out as a teal color, and it's sort of softened, and you just put it on your page like you would, the white gesso. And another thing that I like to do with the gesso is I like to you can put patterns in your gesso. And what happens is, however, whatever patterns you put in there, when it dries, the patterns will stay in there. So it adds some nice, it's an easy way to get some really cool textures in your journal. So there, that page is done. So I want to show you some of my favorite things to use. And you can use the bubble wrap. You can use this when you're painting with a canvas too. Bubble wrap is a lot of fun. And you could just lay it on there. And it's going to make some indentations that you don't necessarily see until you go to paint over it. And then I take that and I'll transfer it and put it on the page next to it, so I don't waste it. I do that while it's wet. And you can see the effect that it made. The other thing I love to do is take plain old plastic wrap and tear some out. And this is an easy way. Sometimes a white page can be intimidated. So you can add some paint to your gesso and then put this saran wrap on there. This is one, I use saran wrap a lot for my backgrounds. I use it in my acrylic paintings, I use it on my watercolor paintings, I use it in my journal. I think I use the plastic wrap in the art studio more than I do anywhere else in the house. And then same thing, I'm going to go over and just push it off of that page. And you're just going to get some neat patterns started. Then I'm going to toss that away and I'll show you. You can't see this very well, but when you start to paint on this page, you're going to see you can see the different patterns that it made. So that's it for using gesso, and I get the question a lot if you have to gesso a canvas. The white canvases that you buy in the store already have gesso put on them, so you don't have to. Some artists like to, and they like to just put thin layers on there, but it's not necessary. I get asked that question a lot. So I hope this was helpful, and I'd love to hear if you have any neat things that you do with gesso. Leave them in the comments, or if you have any questions, and thanks for stopping by. Happy journaling.